Hi, my name is Alireza Karduni. Today I will be talking about our paper titled Belief Decay of Persistence, a mixed method study on belief movement over time. This work was done with my dear co-authors, Shrey, Gupta, and Emily Wall. So data visualizations are important tools for us to communicate science to the public, especially in cases such as COVID-19 and climate change. Creating a common consensus is very important and has important ramifications. So that's why in general it is important to understand belief change. What causes people to change their beliefs, especially in this world where we're always exposed to different kinds of information. It is important to ask what makes this information persistent and persuasive. This question in general is about a very specific kind of belief change where we provide evidence to a person like this that has a belief about gender bias. I am pretty sure in this day and age, no gender bias exists. So this is their prior belief. We then provide them with an evidence. Evidence shows in most professions, women are still paid 77 cents on the dollar compared to men. So after thinking about the provided evidence, this person finds the evidence compelling and says, oh, I see, we need to work a lot more to mitigate gender bias. So this is the case where belief update happens in light of provided information, and we get a posterior belief that's closer to what the evidence shows. So this type of belief update framework has been studied in the visualization community quite a few times. So, for example, work by Yesel Kim and myself and my colleagues at UNC Charlotte, we all studied belief updating with this framework that we show people data and then immediately after that elicit their belief, right? But what happens after some time passes? This is a question that we're starting to ask here. What happens when we go about living our lives after being exposed to a visualization in New York Times or something? This is the type of question that we're going to ask in this paper. Let's take a closer look at another example. So let's ask this beautiful emoji, what is the correlation between years of education and income? And then we can also ask them to draw their correlation as a chart. And they might say, I believe higher education always leads to higher income. And that is their prior belief. But we show them another chart. The chart shows something that is different. It's incongruent to what the person believes. The data shows that there's not a lot of correlation, or the correlation is weak. The emoji consumes the information. When we ask them again, what is the correlation between years of education and income? They might update their belief and say, I believe higher education sometimes leads to higher income. And that is their posterior belief. Now, if after some time passes, we ask the same question again, what do you think would happen? A person's belief might be maintained. They might not change their updated belief after some time. It would look like this, but they might have rationalized the data and the effective data might have strengthened, so their posterior belief could have moved towards the data, or they might rationalize their prior beliefs and move their posterior belief to what they originally thought of. These are some of the things that we're trying to look at. What happens to the posterior updated beliefs over a period of time? Do the updated beliefs stay the same over a period of time? If they change, then what kind of movement is observed? Is that systematic? We operationalize belief movement with several different definitions. So let's take the first example. We present the data to a participant, and then their posterior is something between the prior and the data. And after some time passes, the belief remains the same. We call that belief maintenance. In the second case, as we just discussed, the belief might move towards the prior. In this case, the effect of the data has decayed. We call that belief decay. And then the third case, as you might guess, belief might move after some time passes towards what the data says. So that effective data has strengthened, and we call that belief strengthening. So the hypothesis that we have for this study is that the posterior beliefs would show movement towards the prior over time. So we hypothesize that belief decay will happen. And we also think that the stronger the prior belief, the more likely that we have belief decay, So we think that the strength of belief measured by uncertainty would moderate the amount of belief movement. How we did design the study? We used a method to elicit people's beliefs called line plus cone. With line plus cone, people move their mouses, hovered over a chart, click to select the line that best represents their belief, and then draw a cone around it that represents their uncertainty around their belief. So the wider the cone, the more uncertain the person is. We collected responses for 3 separate variables: immigrant population and crime rate, social media hours and depression rate, and years of education and income. We provided scatter plots, each with 50 data points to participants. We did not provide any other contextual information, just the variable names. And we always provided incongruent evidence to participants. So we first elicited people's backgrounds through a very brief survey. We then trained the participants on the line plus cone elicitation technique. And then we moved to the main part of the study, eliciting people's priors for one variable, then showing the data to the participants. That is always incongruent, and it is important to note that this data is generated based on people's prior belief. And then we again elicit their posteriors, and then the participants play Tetris for 5 minutes. That is the distracting task. And then we elicit the second posterior after some time passes about the same variable. And then we repeat this task for variable 2 and variable 3 all throughout. After this is done, we then show the responses that the participants gave for each of these variables, and we ask them why. We ask them retrospectively to provide their reasons for why they made that belief update. We collected responses from 101 participants using the Prolific platform. All the participants were 18 years of age or more, fluent in English, and from the United States. There were 49 males and 51 females and 1 other. A wide range of ages and a wide range of educational backgrounds. Now, we first conducted quantitative analysis of participants' belief movements, and then we also conducted qualitative analysis on participants' reasons in the retrospective section of the study. So, people's prior beliefs was very different across the 3 variables. So for immigrant population and crime, people generally, on average, believed that there is no correlation between these 2 variables. But for social media hours and depression and education and income, participants believe that there is a positive correlation between these 2 variables. And then the uncertainty around their beliefs was also widely varying across all these variables. So the first finding in our study was that after running a mixed effects regression model, we found that for hypothesis 1, we did not observe any systematic movement of belief after 5 minutes of distracting activity towards the prior or towards the data for that matter. So we could not find that evidence in support of our hypothesis 1. And then for hypothesis 2, to see a moderating effect of strength of belief represented as uncertainty, we again did not find a significant effect. But we decided to make sense of what happens then, to answer the question, then what happens to people believe? We started to look at the individual points. So if we inspect these trends more closely, we can observe how many participants for each dataset maintained their belief. So given some fudge factor of 0.5, we find that 25, 31, and 38 participants respectively maintained their belief. And that is shown in yellow. Now, we also find that 45, 37, and 28 participants respectively showed belief decay or movement towards the prior. That is shown in blue. And then we also find that 31, 33, and 35 participants respectively showed belief strengthening or movement towards the data. And that is shown in purple. We also tried different formulations to look at the distribution of different types of belief movement across our participants. So we increased the fudge factor to 0.1, and then we saw that most individuals with this formulation maintained their belief. And then we also had a third formulation with the idea that if people's belief after playing Tetris for 5 minutes falls under their uncertainty range, represented by the cone of the first posterior elicitation, we will consider that as belief maintenance. And with that, we find that almost 70% of responses show belief maintenance. What's interesting here is that although we don't see a systematic movement towards the prior, we see a lot of people that maintain their beliefs, but we also see some people that have belief strengthening or decay. So that begs the question, why is that happening? Because in a quantitative section, we found that there's no evidence of systematic belief decay, but we did find that there's different types of movement happening. And it begs the question, why that happened. To dig deeper into the reasons behind why these different types of belief movements happen, such as belief decay, maintenance, or strengthening, we conducted a qualitative analysis of participant responses that we collected through this interface where participants saw the responses they gave and provided a written description of the reasons. So as a team, we conducted qualitative coding of this data where all the authors independently identified trends. Then we all came together to discuss until we received to a stable codebook that looked like this. And then we used this codebook to create our set of themes about belief movement that we will talk about. We extracted 9 prototypical themes from the qualitative analysis. This chart shows those 9 themes. We first talk about the set of themes that discussed reasons about moving the belief towards the prior or belief decay. The first theme is a strong prior, where participants resort back to prior belief after the Tetris task. For example, I felt even more confident in my previous answer the more I thought about it, and felt it might even be more positively correlated than before. The second theme is forgetting the data. Participants forgot the data shown during the task. Quote, I couldn't remember my response after viewing the data on the scatter plot, so I defaulted to my original belief, it seems. The third theme is increased chaos, where participants increase their uncertainty over time. An example, that still doesn't make sense to me because why would more people earn less for more education? So I decided to increase the chaos factor. The fourth theme is a wishful prior, where participants express regret to not resort to their prior belief. For example, a participant said, I went along with the data, but I shouldn't have. I think it was a mistake to change from my first graph. Now, the second set of themes is about where participants have belief strengthening. The first theme in this group is a cautious update, where participants updated their beliefs with increased uncertainty. For example, I think I was able to change my mind as I was not quite sure of the relationship between these events. And then the second theme within this group is rationalizing the data, where participants updated their beliefs with increased confidence. For example, I believe that the data concluded that the more hours spent on social media, the less likely one is to have depression. And I was sure of it after the game. The third group is about belief maintenance. The first theme, which was the most prevalent across our study, was when participants they didn't change their belief. For example, I updated my belief based on the scatter plot I was shown. The second theme is maintaining a strong prior. Participants discarded the data shown and maintained their prior belief throughout the study. For example, a participant said, I decided to stick with my initial belief because I had a feeling that I was correct, but I wasn't 100% sure. And the third theme was high uncertainty in the same belief, where participants maintained updated beliefs with high uncertainty throughout the study. For example, according to the data, there's a strong negative correlation but I did not believe this, so I left a wide range of error. And the fourth group is incoherent responses. These are responses that we were not able to link back the reasoning to the data that was shown. So there was a wide variety of reasons and some that were incoherent. So in the qualitative analysis, we find 9 really interesting themes for those 3 types of belief movement that could describe various reasons that people might show belief movement. So this study was among the first in the visualization community to look at belief movement over time, but there's still a lot of questions to be asked. For example, that people might still be remembering the chart they saw and simply mimicking that. Sometimes the elicitation technique might be noisy. It might not reflect the actual belief updating of participants, so we might need better techniques to elicit people's beliefs. And the reasoning behind participants' belief was retrospective, so a lot of it might not be factual, or it might be a sort of rationalization. So in reality, belief movement might be different from the reasonings provided by the participants. In the future, we think that it's important to look at more longer periods of time, for example, 48 hours or 2 weeks. We also think that with different types of visualizations, we might have different amounts of belief, decay, or movement. We might have a more memorable visualization that has a longer lasting effect. And it is important, since our data was generated to be incongruent to the participants' beliefs, to test this sort of belief movement with real data and evidence. Now, in conclusion, we hypothesized that individuals would experience belief decay over time, and we analyzed the belief movement over time for individuals in response to new information. And the quantitative analysis found no statistically significant evidence to support this hypothesis, but the qualitative analysis revealed 9 different reasoning behind different types of belief movement. And this work fills a gap in prior work by beginning to scrutinize assumptions made in belief update studies. And with that, I would like to thank you and hope to see you all in Germany.